Hello, everyone. This is Susan Clinton, one of your co-hosts of Tough to Treat, along with Erica Mello. Today, we are presenting a podcast featuring a mature ballet dancer with chronic low back and hip pain. It's fun. We discuss a blend of movement and pain science to evaluate and treat this interesting case. Let us know your thoughts, leave us any messages, and certainly jump over to iTunes and give us a review. Thanks for your listening. Hello, everybody. This is Susan Clinton and Erica Mello. We are here with Tough to Treat. And I'm up today with my client that I'm going to be talking about. And actually, I'm going to do a little bit of a kind of a conglomeration of clients in the performing arts world that I have seen over the last, couple of years. I have one person that kind of stood out to me, and I'll talk a little bit about her, but this is going to be a little bit true about a few people that I have seen recently. All ballet dancers, all different levels. One was young, another one, and the other three ladies are adult ballet dancers that do it for recreation and fitness and fun and have danced most of their lives. And I have kind of tended to become their go-to person when they're having some of their aches and pains. So I've seen them for many different things. But this one that I'm thinking of today to kind of talk about is somebody who has come in, and she basically is presenting with what you would consider lower lumbar kind of symptoms, pain in her right lumbar spine, down into her right posterior hip and pelvis. And it's interesting because the pain wrapped around her knee, and then it, like a big circle, she would like draw the circle around her knee. These people are so graphic. I love it. They just could, they want to like take out the markers and draw everything on their bodies. And then she has the pain pointing down the lateral leg. So, my first thoughts are, oh, sounds like it's something nerve root related, right?
Exactly. How old is she, Susan?
She's in her 50s.
50s. Got it. Okay.
So these ladies are, all in their, late 40s, early 50s.
Okay.
So they have a typical busy women with joint aches and pains and stuff, usually very simple stuff. They just want to know that, hey, I'm okay and I can keep going, right? And, with this population, including the young one that I saw, one of the things that I always do is I use ballet as their rehab. So I never take them away from class. It's like I scale bar, and I may pull them off of center floor for a while, and I may, do some different things like that, but they're always, at the bar doing their work, and I just change what they're doing and help them find changes and variance in how they do it. And it's always interesting before we even hop into what I started to do with her. I always find it very interesting because I get a lot of people sending me questions and asking me questions about how much can you change somebody's alignment, somebody's posture without changing the aesthetics of what they're supposed to look like. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I think that a lot of ballet dancers believe they're doing something for a reason to make them look straight, and they're actually not. And when you actually can get in and get them activating different muscles, they find that not only are they straight, but they are, you have freed up their hips so that they can actually do a full développé or, adjust your leg way up high. Whereas if they're holding into this really tight pelvic tuck that a lot of them have developed over the years, it actually prevents them from moving well. So It's very interesting, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we get going. So anyway, so she, has these symptoms that, she talks about coming across her thigh and wrapping around her knee, and it's been one of these insidious things that has been going on for a while. And she was, kind of concerned about coming in. She's just like, I'm not real sure if you can help me, but my friends told me to come, so here I am. Let's, and I said, well, let's just try to figure this out. So I had the nerve root suspicion in the back of my head, and I'm thinking, well, gosh, maybe she's, more of that degenerative age for a little spinal stenosis. But her symptoms were coming opposite of what you would expect with spinal stenosis. She would get the, much more typical of a regular nerve root type symptoms. It came more with whenever she was flexing the hip, right? So sitting on the floor, leaning over, picking things up, in ballet doing port de bras, which is, for those of you who don't know ballet terms, it's bending at the hips and going down with the trunk towards the floor. So those are the, and then any kind of movement that would cause her to raise her leg up in the air. So she was really getting a bit steamed because she wanted to, ballet was that's her thing. She just, that's her solace in life, is to go to class and, do that and feel good. And she's, just really been struggling. So anyway, so I had that in the back of my mind, but I decided that I wanted to challenge my conformational biases a little bit, as I like to do. And I thought, okay, I did a quick little nerve root screen: up on your toes, walk; on your heels, walk. Quick little reflex, takes a couple of minutes just to run through that. Sensory wise, she was fine. Reflex is fine. Couldn't really find any motor problems, so I could go, okay, boop, off the list.
Right.
Got it out of the way, but took like 3 minutes to run through that screen real quick. And it just kind of okay, so now I'm going to challenge my conformational biases and see what I can figure out with this. So in my usual way, my first thing is, a bend over is what I always like to do. But on her, I decided to change it because I thought, well, I know she's already told me that bending bothers her. So, so let's go somewhere else. So I decided that I was going to look at rotation, which is my favorite go-to thing, right? Is try to find out, where are they not rotating and why are they not rotating? So we just did the standing, plant the feet on the ground, turn the body around, head, eyes, the whole thing. And it was actually so remarkable to me that from above her hips all the way to her neck, she did not move. Her whole body turned like a rod. Yeah.
Oh, right. That's interesting.
It was very interesting. Right?
So how did she...
I was totally it was not what I was expecting at all. I was like, oh, okay. So where she moved a lot was at her feet and at her knees.
Of course, right.
And that's not atypical with dancers.
Yeah.
And then where she really, really moved a lot and looked like where everything was being driven from was her eyes and her head. She really was cranking her head around and her eyes to really get her body around.
I do this test a lot as well. I do it both from behind them and in front of them. So do you do that as well? Yeah. Okay. That's what I do. It is interesting.
Do a whole 360 thing. I think it'd be great to set up one of those 360 cameras.
Right.
And be able to see somebody from all of those positions. If I didn't make myself dizzy.
I know. So you thought she was moving from her eyes and her head. So nothing in the thorax,
Yep. So it was initiated. Yeah. It was initiated from her head. That's the first thing that moved. The eyes and the head moved together. Unless I coach people out of that, I usually see eyes and head moving together and not eyes moving further. But she was that was where everything was happening. And then her whole body would just turn, but it would stay just as straight and still as it was. And everything was happening, at the hips and down through the knees and the feet. So there was movement, both sides. Both directions. So one side maybe a little less than the other. Just, at some point you just can't keep splitting hairs. It was like, okay, this is interesting. What I'm seeing is no movement. So it's like, okay, so what do I do? Do I go after changing where she's moving too much, or do I go in and try to create some movement, help her create some movement where she's not moving enough?
Right.
And, the answer to that is I have no idea. What I decided to do was to do a little bit more exploration to see if, let me get her at the bar and let me see what she does with some typical ballet moves and see if this pattern continues. And so what I just basically had her do is just stand in first position, and I said, just show me your presentation. I'm not going to say, there's no judgment, just show me what you look like in class when you go to first position and you begin to breathe. Yeah. And so, what I found with her, watching her, is that she does it's kind of an interesting thing. I've called it a pelvic tuck, because it's not a posterior pelvic tilt. I guess in some sense of the word it is, but it's more like and it's not coming from the glutes pulling the pelvis down and the abs pulling the pelvis up in front. It comes from the hamstrings yanking on the sacrotuberous ligament and driving that pelvis downward. It's very, very interesting. Yeah. So I noticed that right away. Again, conformational bias, I probably tend to look for that a little bit too much. But I just noticed it. But I also noticed that on her feet, she would immediately, as she started to get ready to move, she actually kind of rolled forward onto her naviculars. But when she stood there, in just presentation, at the bar, she didn't. So it was in preparation for movement that I saw that, that just that split second before she started to move.
Yes.
And that was, so I noted that, and I thought, okay, let's see what else happens here. And then she raises her arm up, and then she starts to tell me, she was holding on with her right hand, and she starts to tell me, my left shoulder always bothers me, and it never goes back, far behind my head like I want it to. It's like, okay, well, right hip, left shoulder, I'm thinking diagonal now. Is there something maybe in one of the slings or, so, we're just kind of watching movement. And so I just have her move. And as she bends over, the only place where she's really moving a lot is at her hips. And she can only go so far. She doesn't flex in her trunk at all. So she's been, one of these people that have been trained never to move your trunk. It's starting to kind of hit me like the trunk doesn't move, Which
is surprising in a dancer, though.
It is very much so. And so in that, her pain would come on. So I said, just only go where you're not having symptoms. And let me just, let's just see the movement. So we did a number of different things and watching. And what I noticed, and then I had her do some of the other movements that require a cross midline and some different things. I wanted to see what her trunk was going to do. And I'm going to tell you, this trunk stayed so still. It was, I don't even think I could teach somebody core exercises to keep their trunk as still as her trunk stayed. So I just asked her to come away from bar, and we just did some simple things. She's a dancer by background, so I just said, let's just do a few salsa moves so I could get her hips going and her lumbar spine going into some side bending. I wanted to see if I got her away from ballet thinking that if this would free up, because I didn't want to jump on and start doing manual therapy right away thinking that it's stiff or checking to see if it was stiff.
Right.
I wanted to see what I could get movement wise first.
Right. And take her out of the context.
Yeah. So I took her completely out of context, kept her in a dance context, but completely out of a ballet context. And so she was able to do it. She was able to move and move her hips, and then her trunk would loosen up. And so it was like, okay, this isn't a stiff joint problem.
Right. No,
this is definitely a pattern problem that has been, kind of put in there for so long. And when she started to do that, I said, how does your symptoms feel? And she said, well, they never really bother me so much when I'm standing. When I said, well, okay, so let's exaggerate these movements a little bit, so we kind of started to put in some leg gesture movements and some arm gesture movements with the salsa movement and some other things, and just do a head drop and come up and see how you feel. And she was able to do all of these things without any symptoms. Which was very interesting. So it was like, okay, so that made me start thinking all right, I think what we have going on here is a situation that, her central nervous system is set up, or she set up this pattern in her central nervous system for so long. This is the correct way I need to move. This is how a ballet dancer moves. And for some reason, it's just kind of, it's become the enemy for her at this point, because now she's not able, when she's in the ballet context versus the context I had her in, she was unable to disassociate the movement between her hip, her pelvis, and her lumbar spine. So much that even her thoracolumbar area wasn't rotating, you know. But she had rotation. So I want to make that really clear. It wasn't that her back was stiff. She didn't have ankylosing spondylitis. She didn't, I'm sorry. She just had this pattern. It was amazing to watch it too.
For people out there, did you test her thoracic rotation in sitting at all before you did this?
That's exactly where we went.
Okay.
Was to the sitting position right after this, because I wanted to just kind of get an idea of, what her ballet context looked like. And I didn't really want to get into her spine. I wanted to see what I could get out of her with movement before we did. So I decided, okay, you know what? I know the hips and the lumbar spine move. I want it now that I've gotten her freed up and she's in this movement context away from ballet. I said, well, while you're sitting here, just rotate to the right and the left. I didn't turn it into a big, okay, now let's test this. And she was able to rotate left and right. It was amazing. So I stood her back up and I said, then let's rotate left and right again. And it was a little bit better. It wasn't great, but it was a little bit better. It had already started to change. And so I kind of commented on that to her. I said, does that feel different than when you did it earlier, and she had to think about it because either they're all up in their head so much they overthink.
I was just going to say that. And they tend to have these movement patterns ingrained in their brain, and like before you even, like they could do it in their sleep. That's how much, So, and you see patients, especially dancers and other patients, but it's almost like their movement pattern is their movement pattern, and to try to get them out of the movement pattern, you have to almost trick them in a way,
right?
Trick their brains in a way and try to do in different contexts like you did. And I think that since we're movement experts, it's important that the audience realizes that doing something like this is really important, and getting the patient to move before you plop them on the table, because you're not going to glean a ton of stuff by getting them on the table and mobile,
right?
Looking at the lumbar and do some pivums and pavums and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think that's awesome.
The coolest thing about it is, and you and I talk about this all the time, is getting the buy-in.
Yes.
Because I honored her, she's a dancer. I needed to meet her where she was.
Right.
To do little bitty simple diddly things wasn't going to really change anything. I needed to really meet her where she was and let her explore her movement with me and find out where she was hanging up. And so she really became very interested in what I was doing. And I needed her buy-in for a certain reason, because what I wanted to do was I wanted to see if I could get her to get out of that, what I call that pelvic tuck. I know I coined a kind of crazy word here, but I didn't know what else to call it. So I've been calling it that for years. Yeah. And so I talked to her a little bit, because she always said, I stretch and stretch and stretch my hamstrings and I can't ever get them to lengthen. The same age-old story, it's because your hamstrings are overworking.
Yes.
And your pelvis is pulled down. I've got my hands here showing Erica that are, pulling down, like I'm grabbing sacrotuberous ligaments and just yanking them down. Your brain is kind of set up that these muscles are your stability point.
Right. I was just going to say that.
What you're trying to move around. Yes. And I said, just explore this with me, because if we can get you to move a little bit different and you have less pain, would you be willing to take that into ballet class a little bit? And I know their teacher. I know her very well, and she doesn't think that I'm doing anything horrible or unsacred to her dancers.
Did she say why she starts off in this tuck position? Was she taught that?
She just said that this is the position that we're supposed to be in ballet. And that's always what I hear. This is the position I'm supposed to be in. And it's like, okay, but what if I make sure that you are in a position that looks good for ballet, but it's different than what you're doing?
Right.
And then they kind of like look at you like, I don't think you can do that, and it's like, okay, but let's try.
Right.
So, go ahead. Go ahead.
A lot of ballet instructors don't know the mechanics of the body, and they're great at what they do. But I think when it comes to actually looking at someone who has an issue, they're taught certain ways. This is how you do it in ballet, and these patients' cognitive beliefs need to get almost debunked in order for them to move on, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting whenever you're treating performing artists, because there's such a traditional hierarchical type of training that goes on. Ballet instructors were once dancers, and they learned from their maestros. Yeah. And it's traditionally passed on. It's the same with violinists. I think we talked about that with the young mother, with the DRA and the pelvic heaviness that was also a violinist, and getting her to come out of her patterns where, was a challenge for her, but, she just moves so much more beautifully now and plays with such richness that she didn't have before, which is just amazing to see. But anyway, I just decided that, okay, rather than focusing in on the area that hurts, and she's stretching and can't get the pain to go away, I decided I'm going to go where hang your hat on whatever you can find, right? Right. And I thought, well, I could pick on the head, and I still, the head, that whole head kind of thing was still kind of, how she initiated everything from her head, especially being a dancer.
Yeah.
I would expect a lot more initiation through the chain from below. So this is going to become kind of the opposite of your lady with the releve,
right?
Pain, coming from up above the chain being the problem. This is like something going on down below. And, maybe if I can change what's happening at her feet, I can get her to actually have to change something up through her pelvis and her back. So as I told you, she had this, and she did it with every movement, this initial kind of rocking forward at her feet onto her naviculars before she would go up and point her toe or do any of these types of things. So I said, how about I'm going to come here, and I just kind of got on the floor and I just said, I'm just going to be right here on your feet. And I put my thumbs underneath her naviculars. And I said, whatever you do, is something we always did with the little children in ballet, is don't squash the arch people. You know, don't kill the arch people that live under the arch. So I just slid my, you know, my hands or my thumbs right under. And I said, just do your thing. And all that did was bring awareness to her as how much she was actually leaning her whole body forward to initiate movement.
Right.
So,
it's almost like she puts, it's that whole center of mass thing again, right? And usually when people have issues with movement, I call it the fail or the buckle point or whatever you want to call it, generally happens at the beginning. And it's almost like she tried to get herself forward, stabilize herself, but you need mobility as a dancer. And that strategy was not working, obviously.
Right. So, and so what was happening was trying to gain stability was what was probably robbing her of her mobility or her flexibility. And she was having to push through that and push through that and push through that. And that may have been one of the things that kind of set up her pain experience. I don't know. Pain experiences are weird. You know, other people could do it and never have pain. So, but for her, it was an issue. So anyway, so all I did was have her we just worked at her feet there for a bit to where she could actually feel like, oh. And so I said to her, I said, what's going through your brain when you do this, when you're working with me on this? And she goes, I think what I was trying to do was get the weight over my big toe, and I didn't realize that all I was doing was rolling over my arch. So, because she knows that the big toe was balance point, so she tries to align herself over her big toes, even if she's in, first position in full turnout, and it's like, well, when you're in this position, you really need to just think about where your foot is going to be the most stable. So we just talked about it a little bit, and I like to kind of point out where the tibia kind of, for dancers and things like that, I talk a lot about where the tibia actually meets the foot, but just in front of that, which for you and I is the midfoot. For them, it's just like right here in front, this is where you're designed to be strong. The whole architecture of your foot, if you think about flying buttresses and arches and all the key stings, that's where that is. So I said, think more about that instead of about your big toe. And let's just see what happens. And so she did that. And so then that started her. And then she was like, okay, now I feel a little bit off balance. And it's like, that's okay, because now your strategy up the chain is going to have to change a little bit. And so let's just play with that a little bit and see what happens.
So when you made her aware of her center of mass and sort of her aware of her navicular, her midfoot, did her tuck change at all?
It did. It started to change, which I was pleased about, because I didn't have to go up and grab her pelvis and untuck it. I don't want to do that, because then you just start a fight. I'm fighting with an ingrained pattern, and I'm never going to win that fight. It's just like, and then it becomes my fight, not theirs, and that's not good either. I just wanted her to experience the change, which she did. But the interesting thing she said to me, she goes, that wraparound feeling on my knee is better.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I said, oh, you had the wraparound thing with your knee going on and standing? And she said, oh, yes, all the time.
How forgetful of her, I know. To tell you.
Like, right? They're just so used to listening to the noise that they don't pay attention to until it goes away.
I know.
So she started kind of on her own. She kind of took off and started playing with that, and then she actually did what I would have asked her to do. She just went onto her right leg. She goes, oh, I wonder what happens if I can stand and balance on my right leg. So she just started working on that. I thought, okay, I'm going with it. Let's just go.
Yep.
And I said, well, let's see what happens. So we did. So she was starting to come out of that deep pull down, really deep, lower tucking thing going on. And starting to let that go just a little bit. And so now I started noticing that there's some flexion and extension happening in the trunk a little bit, and some side bending. She's balance, the balance system is like going, whoa, we have a change coming up. Proprioceptors are all saying, hey, we're doing something different. The cerebellum is going, basal ganglia, we've got a change here. What do you want us to do with it? So basically what we did was kick basal ganglia out of the chair again and say, hey, got to come up with some new motor maps. Let's see what we could do. And so I allowed her to explore that a bit, with her brain. And she did. And then, so one of the things I started noticing was not only would she like to hold her trunk really tight, but when things got a little bit tough for her, she did this big kind of rib flaring, which the ribs would come forward and open out. And there was a lot of breath holding going on.
Yep.
A lot of breath holding. And, me and breath, that's like my bread and butter. And I'm like,
they all do that though.
Pay attention to the breathing here.
Yep.
But there was just so much going on that you can only pick and choose one battle at a time.
Yeah.
So we had her, kind of change, brought the mirror over because ballet dancers tend to be a little bit of mirror dancers too. And I said, just do this for a second. I said, don't look in the mirror, look straight ahead. And I just had her change her ribs position just a little bit. By bringing it out of that big anterior opened up flare and just bringing it, kind of like what Julie Wiebe talks about, just, coming back over the top of the pelvis a little bit so that, just changing the alignment to see what muscles would click on.
Mm-hmm.
And, I said, try that and keep your feet where you have them because you've been working on that. So this is good. Just see if this balances you over your feet better. Mm-hmm. And so she messed around with that just a little bit. And I said, now, when she got into first position in a different position, she completely untucked. And I said, look in the mirror. And she turned and she looked. And I said, and then I'll look back. And I said, does that feel like what you think is going on in your body? She goes, it feels like my butt's way back behind me and that I'm slouched forward. Mm-hmm. And I said, what do you see in the mirror? She goes, I look fantastic. And I was like, yes. I was like, woo! But she loved the alignment that she saw. And and I said, now, go to your go-to position. You know where it is. I'm not going to give her names and things like that because I don't want her running around saying things, to herself. And so I just said, go back to your original go-to position. And so she did. And I said, now change it. And, I wanted to see what she would do to change it.
Yep.
And here's the most interesting thing because I thought it was going to happen at the foot. I thought, okay, she's going to rock back on that foot a little bit and get over that architecture. You know what she did?
What?
She changed her head.
Oh, interesting.
She did. She had this chin jut that was just kind of there all the time too. That not even like a forward head, more like an extension chin jut.
Yeah.
Forward, kind of like what the ribs were doing.
Yeah.
And I think so. The feet were leaning forward to balance that front-loaded stuff that was going on in her body. So she actually dropped her chin down, and everything changed. It was just like.
Because that goes back to the fact that you saw in the body twist, she initiated with her eyes.
Right.
That is.
But I said that the head ran everything, and I had that in the back of my mind. But I thought, okay, I'm just gonna, I went for the feet because I thought this is the most obvious thing that I saw was that, that kind of movement thing going on, and it just really surprised me because I love to sit back and say, okay, now change it. And see how you feel. And we were using the wraparound knee pain as kind of our guide because she didn't have the back pain as much in standing still.
Right.
That much more with the flexion movement. So, we were using the wraparound knee thing because she was like latched onto that, and that was good that she was able to make that change. And so I just watched her I had to take my confirmational bias away and just say, you do it, because I wanted to tell her so bad what to do. I just I don't want to, you feel like you want to jump in and like, do this, do this, do this, do this. And it's like, oh, Susan, stay away. Let her brain sort this out.
Exactly. Well, that's part of our jobs, too, as physical therapists. Let's empower the patient to figure it out themselves in the end, right?
Exactly, because she's got to go back and go to ballet and do it.
Yep.
And she's not going to remember, move back on your foot, do this, do that. She's just going to remember, change it. So she dropped her chin. She actually took a nice breath and she put herself in a different alignment. And it wasn't one that I coached into her. I just offered her, here's a way to stand, here's a way to stand, here's the way you've been standing. This one feels better than this one. Are you straight? Are you okay with that? And she was, and now she was ready to take it and try to begin to pull it into her system because it made her knee feel better.
Yeah, and that untucked her pelvis, I'm sure, right?
Exactly. It totally did. And so what ended up happening was, and she had this beautiful control of her turnout, and she was able to go up onto releve on her right leg and hold the position because her glutes were actually working as external rotators.
Yes.
And they weren't being pulled into this deep pelvic tuck thing. And so I just decided to take her one step further while she was, I said, come back down onto flat, stay in passe, which means for those who don't know dance, their hip and knee are bent and their toe is on their, on the side of their knee. So it's just a ballet position that they often do up on point or up in releve, but they can do it in flat too. And I said, just come back down to flats, keep your passe position because that requires a lot of external rotation holding at the pelvis, which was good because she wasn't able to tuck in to, she would lose that position that she had. So she stayed there, and I said, and just do kind of a fun little, contemporary ballet move for me. Turn towards your leg, adjust your leg. I wanted to see if her dadgum trunk would rotate. I just wanted to see, just show me some rotation. And she did. She was able to rotate.
That's great.
And so that was the beginning of the building block for her, was to be able to put that in, and I just, all I did was I say, now you know how to change it. All you need to do is add breathing to it.
Yep.
Try to be aware of your breath holding. So everybody does it, especially when things get hard. But you're accomplished enough and strong enough that you don't need to hold your breath to accomplish a movement.
Right.
So I wanted to get her to challenge her conformational bias a little bit and say, challenge yourself and see if you can't breathe through that motion now. And so she did the whole thing again, back up onto her toes, breathing. And again, it was so amazing. I never once told her about her head, about her chin, about anything. That's how she changed her movement pattern, was by initiating a different movement in her head.
Yeah,
and she released her back when she did that. The whole axial skeleton changed. On cue, because now she could turn her head.
I know, it's, you think about people when their center of mass is so far forward, when whatever they're doing, posterior chain fires, everything fires to prevent them from falling over. But when you take them out of that movement pattern, the brain has to figure out a way to get those muscles to fire. And it's not like they're weak. It's just that they need to be recruited in a different movement pattern. And the brain figures it out. It's, so plastic. And I think that people, especially dancers, are so into their bodies and they get it. And for somebody like her to make that change that quickly,
oh my goodness gracious, it was amazing.
Pretty astounding.
It was great. And but basically she made that change that fast because I got out of the way. I offered a few things. I gave her some choices. We talked. I got the buy-in, which was huge. And then as we were doing this stuff, when her knee pain changed or her knee symptoms changed, and she was like all in, because then it was like, whoa, that's the carrot. There it is. I don't want that again. I like not having that. And she liked the ability to change and move. I've seen her I saw her over 6 weeks. I think I saw her 4 times. She got to where she could actually stand in center floor and do jeté kicks that were higher than she's ever done before without pain. Jeté kicks, for those of you who don't know, those are straight leg up into the air with your leg, so a lot of flexion and external rotation at the hip, to accomplish that movement, and a lot of balance and stability on the side that's on the ground. And it was one that she had a lot of trouble with because she said, my hamstrings are tight. Well, she's since learned that her hamstrings aren't tight. Right. And she just was putting herself in a position to make them overwork. So now she's like, she can kind of figure this out. And every time she starts to struggle now, she'll tell me, she goes, I just remember that if I start to breathe, I do better. And I had to this day, in 6 weeks' time, I never told her that it's because of your head. She figured it out. There wasn't any reason for me to throw those words in there and get her subconscious about her head and her face and her neck. I mean, her brain figured it out. It was just like the cue that helped her begin to drop her chin, and in center floor. And later, as I was working with her, was like, don't forget the breathing. Bring the breathing on. And that was a cue that did it for her.
So did you send her home with anything else other than that?
So I sent her back to bar. I said, here's bar, here's what you're going to do. And we scaled it. And I said, don't worry about trying to get your leg up. Don't worry about this. What I don't want you to have is symptoms. But she loved the fact that she could return, because she was so afraid to come to me, because she was afraid that I would tell her that she couldn't go to ballet.
Right.
And I don't know why she was afraid of that, because the 2 other ladies that I've seen that dance with her in that class, I've never told one of them not to return to ballet. It's like, we're going to use ballet as your rehab,
Absolutely.
They're going to So I scaled bar a little bit with her. We talked through it, and we talked about, some changing of stuff and some things to think about, and the breathing. And I said, center floor, just without symptoms, whatever you feel comfortable with without symptoms. I said, we don't want to keep pushing through those symptoms, because it's not going to change anything. Let's try to move away from, let's try to give you movements away from the symptoms. It's so like ballet for you. And, because I said, it'll settle down. And as she started to move more, and she got that disassociation from her back and more rotation freely, in her movement patterns, her symptoms, the second time she came to see me, not the first time I was the initial, the second time she was 50% better.
That's great.
By the time we're at the third time, she was complaining about her shoulder that didn't go up over her head.
Right.
So these other symptoms were gone, and so we just worked on some more breathing and some more rotational movements and stuff. And by the time I saw her, I think it was the fourth time, she was able to just pull that arm back. And never once did I stretch her pecs. Never once did I, jump in and mobilize the ribs. I didn't need to do any of those things. She was able to get it going through her movement system, and that's what I really wanted for her. Was to understand that she had the power to pull herself out of this, the little coaching, and that, she was going to feel confident and, great moving forward.
I think a lot of people, with a lot of these people, you're basically changing the way they move, and instead of unhealthy things like, oh, I think it's your disc, or I think it's this, or I think it's that, which is completely unhealthy. If you tell somebody, we just need to change the way you move, it really sort of dampens down their nervous system, and whatever beliefs they've been told before, it just dampens down their nervous system. And I also think, and I was writing notes here as you were talking, I love the way you started out with movement. And I know for new grads and young, early clinicians, you need to sort of sometimes do your basic movement techniques. However, I think for me at this point in my career, it's, you see these patients, you're like, oh, doing the basic things is boring. It's boring for me. And I'm not going to sit there and do bend forward. Boring. I will shoot myself. So I like the way you did, just got her directly into movement, and just see how the patient moves, whatever they're coming in with. And even if you're a new clinician, if you're being told to do these things, just throw a movement in, just make it up, or make it relevant to their story, but start to do more of that, because you almost started at the end. Do you know what I mean? So a lot of people figure out movement at the end, but why not start with that at the beginning of the evaluation and start having them move and let them figure it out? Because ultimately your job is done. They'll figure it out for you. And I really like that sequence, as opposed to just, getting them on the table, slumping them, straight leg raise. If people are going to shoot me for this, it's boring, but sometimes you need to do that. I understand. I get it. I do get it. Look, if I suspect it's a hot disc, I'm not going to slump them to the end, but I'm going to be doing certain things, to confirm that. But this woman was not. Those red flags were cleared, and I think that starting with a movement pattern and then taking it from there is a really nice way to change your evaluations up, and I like that.
Good, yeah.
That's my soapbox.
No, but I think it's an important one to realize, because everybody out there, remember, my first thought was nerve root.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And, and I looked for the patterns. Was it spinal stenosis type of nerve root, or was it a nerve root due to something else? But I thought nerve root. And so I just did a quick neurological screen. It didn't take long to do, but it was nice to get that out of the way. It took 3 minutes, went through it. She already told me she had pain with, flexing her leg and raising it straight up in the air. Why am I going to lay her on her back and do that? I knew I didn't really see the sense in doing it. And like I said, what I didn't do was I didn't take her right into the movement that really caused a lot of her symptoms, which was a bend over. And as everybody who's listened to this podcast knows, I love bend overs because I like to get people to change them right away and see that they can bend over without symptoms or less symptoms or different symptoms, So, but with her, I just had this feeling that I needed to go right into rotation. I just wanted to see what she did, and I wanted to see how she moved. And that's where, we just took off. We just said, let's just start with the movements. And I saw what I was seeing, and I thought, I wonder what it looks like on a ballet bar. I wonder what it looks like in center floor. I wonder can I get her to change out of this before I go drag her back to the table and jump up and down on her spine.
Yeah, and I think
it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, we function in 3D in this world. It's not like we're soldiers, right? I mean, and we're not standing with our arm like in tight hold. And I do look at rotation a lot, as you do. I mean, I do that body twist a lot, and I do it and then I check it in sitting. I think those are really quick screens to look at, and you can look at you can see the entire body moving with that type of a rotational pattern. And I do think that we need to check rotation, whatever the person's coming in with, just to see how they're moving. And that's a really nice way of doing it, in standing before they get on the table, if that's where you're going to take them.
It's cool, because I think, in my experience, I think rotation is one of the things that's lost.
Yeah.
And I think that it's just one of the things we lose early on, because we see people moving well in a coronal plane and very well in a sagittal plane, right? As Homo sapiens, we're very sagittal plane movers. We're walkers and runners. I mean, that's what we were designed to do. But, where we get into trouble is when we lose that transverse plane motion. And, and I think that's what bogs down, not to get off subject here, but I think it's what bogs down a lot of pelvic floor stuff. The lack of rotation. It's not meant to just squeeze and hold. It's meant to like stretch and move, and the pelvis is supposed to rotate, and the trunk is supposed to rotate, and I think we lose that. And this whole kind of thought about holding everything so still. And she was just, I don't know if anybody somewhere in the road told her, to tuck her belly in and hold it flat against her spine. That's a cue I hear about ballet dancers all the time. Bring your belly button to your spine, which isn't a bad thing, but they sit there and they keep it. They don't, they're afraid to come out of that. And that's, no, you can't do the things you need to do well if you're holding that so stiff. And she just, that pattern was really quite a pattern. It's been a long time since I've seen somebody able to keep their entire shoulders to their hips, to the top of their hips, to their pelvis, that still, and move at their neck and move at their hips and their knees and their feet. I mean, it was really, I couldn't even believe I was seeing it. It was just like, whoa, okay. But to have pointed that out to her would have been detrimental.
So what made you go think about rotation at the beginning? Anything in your brain? Was it a gut feel?
It was a gut feel. I will tell you, like I said, one of the things that I like to do first is a bend over, then I always go to rotation next. I just felt like she had already told me about her pain. She'd already told me how her pain came on. And I thought bending over is going to do nothing but aggravate her. And I thought, I'm just going to forget that. We already know that that's a problem. And I'm going to go to rotation and see how she's moving. And that's what I did. So then we decided to take the movement to the bar and to, things that were meaningful, because these were the things that we know she wanted to be able to. And the cool thing is that her symptoms changed in other parts of her life, and we never really talked about, bending over a whole lot to pick up stuff off the floor. She already was changing how she was moving and feeling great, and that just tended, we were lucky here, it tended to kind of move over on other people. I may have to spend a little time with them, kind of like, let's clean up bend over, let's clean up squatting, let's clean up, this, so that you can do this without pain. With her, her focus was a ballet class. It really changed her. That was her focus. And so I needed to meet her where she was. And that was the other reason I think about, the rotation, was I just thought, we'll get to the bend over soon enough at bar. I'll check port a bar. We never even really got there that first day, because we started working on rotation and started making changes there. And, that's when I saw her head change. And it was like our head.
Very true.
So it just kind of went with what her body was going to, the road that the body wanted to go on. It was like, okay, here we go.
I think ultimately it's the strategy that they've been using for years and years and years.
Absolutely.
And any patient that you see, whatever they're coming in with, it's something they're doing short of like trauma. It's something they're doing for years and years and years. And you just need to make them aware of that, because they don't realize that's what they're doing.
Right.
And especially in the performing artists, they are like, oh, I didn't realize. And then they'll make a change quickly because they can do that. And I think in somebody who's not a performing artist, you have to work a little bit more with them and maybe educate them a little bit more as to move. They're not going to be able to make that change as quickly. That's just my experience. But they'll get there.
Exactly. Okay.
This was great. Love this one.
Yes, thank you. And thanks everybody for listening. We look forward to your reviews. Any comments or suggestions you have would be greatly appreciated. And if you get the opportunity, please go to iTunes and leave us a review. It means a lot for us, and it means a lot for our podcast. And Erica, until the next time.
Sounds good. Until next time, Susan. Bye,
guys.
All right.
Bye. Hello, everyone. This is Susan Clinton. And I have an announcement. Erica and I are launching a professional mentoring platform for those tough to treat cases that you may have in your practice. We would love for you to contact us on social media, or Erica at ericamello.com or Susan at embodied-pt.com if you're interested. Give us your email, as a newsletter will keep you updated on the launch to date. Stay tuned, as there will be a limited number of spots available. Looking forward to seeing you on social media or by email. Thank you.